It is being bold, it is being brilliant, it's being non-apologetic about what we're doing.
We had to leverage those abilities and just to come to the table and execute like never before.
Bring in capable people, coach them, make sure they're connected to the outcome, and let them run.
As a leader and with your team, have to have the will to win.
Connecting more with our humanity and, pausing for a moment to be the human beings that we are.
But with humility, you know that you can leverage that skill set that people have and let them be their best.
This will be a time of innovation.
Hi, and welcome to Courageous Leadership in Times of Global Crisis and Uncertainty, an HMG live virtual briefing covering what matters most to drive a winning agenda and make the future a better place. A warm welcome to today's host, Lead Principal and CEO of HMG Strategy, Hunter Muller.
Good morning and welcome. Welcome, Houston. My team and I are delighted to be here. I'm Hunter Muller, founder and CEO of HMG Strategy. Really excited. We have an all-star lineup for you here today. It's been unusual times, right? Unprecedented times by any standard, a global pandemic and the impact as it ripples across the world and across the North American and U.S. economy. We're here with a group of exceptional thought leaders, practitioners, giving pointed advice, lessons learned in the crisis, and how they've thrived and survived in times of crisis. A big thank you to today's virtual summit partner, CyberArk. We'll hear from their thought leader here in a moment, and our dear friends at Hughes and SIM. Big thanks to the SIM family for making this all happen, and Genesys Works. Genesys Works, our partner, our nonprofit partner here, we'll hear from in a minute. And a lot to talk about HMG. We have a series of events through the next 90 days. We think we'll be digital now forever, and we will be resuming our physical summits here in the third and fourth quarter of 2020. Please spread to your social network what we're doing here. We're leveraging down and really committing 100% of our resources in this time of intrigue and need for our whole industry, right? And so again, a big thank you for zooming in, and let's get on with the program. David Williams, folks, is a fascinating individual. We met about 2 months ago in person in Phoenix. Had the pleasure, David, to interview you. David's got a fascinating background. A year and a half with Genesys Works, based in Houston. Houston loves Genesys Works, and Genesys Works loves Houston. A big data point here. We first started promoting Genesys Works, David, 12 years ago. I think it was 2010 when we first met the Genesys Works team. But Dave's got an incredible background. 14 years as president and CEO of Make-A-Wish, 11 years as the executive director of the Houston Food Bank. So, and of course, a University alumni grad and an HMG Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. David, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Hunter. As always, it's really such an honor to be with you and to be with the HMG network. These gatherings are so powerful, and it's just it's great to be here. And
so give us an update. What's Genesys Works, and how are you thriving and surviving in these tough times?
Yeah, it is tough times. So first of all, if I could just take a second to tell this group just a little bit of what Genesys Works is, and then how we've pivoted. And so first of all, good morning, Houston. As a proud Houstonian, as Hunter mentioned, who lived in Houston from 1981 to 1994, and now once again, January 19, I'm thrilled to just say a few words to you. So in 2002, Rafael Alvarez was an executive with Compaq Computer Company. There's a name from the past, in Houston, and also serving Houston Charter School. And he saw that on one hand, a company was really struggling to find young, diverse talent. And on the other side, he was dismayed to see graduates of this charter school not succeeding in college and not succeeding in the workplace. And so, like a true Houston entrepreneur, he started Genesys Works to build a bridge between these two worlds. And so, in short, what we do is identify students during their junior year in high school, and during the summer, in between their junior and senior year, they participate in an intensive 2-month summer training program, teaching technology, business operations skills, along with professional skills, so that during their senior year in high school, they can work 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, for the entire year and provide real value to companies in areas such as help desk, system refreshes, quality assurance testing, numerous business operations functions. And the results are tremendous. Corporations get real value because their young professionals are in jobs for 9 to 12 months, unlike a typical college internship that's, a lot of times 6 to 8 weeks. And more corporations are ending up hiring our students as they often go to college locally so they can earn and learn at the same time. So from initially starting in Houston, we've expanded to 6 cities across the country. We have nearly 1,000 young professionals and internships. In Houston, we partner with 50 corporations ranging from Kinder Morgan to Centerpoint Energy to Texas Children's Hospital, just to name a few. And to put a name behind some of these numbers, Harris Adams is a senior at Energy Institute in Houston, and he's been interning this year with Walter P. Moore Company. And so when COVID-19 hit, Harris played a huge role in helping Walter P. Moore convert to a remote working environment. He received an on-the-spot bonus from the CIO. And so speaking of COVID overall, we're thrilled and grateful that 80% of our young people were able to pivot, and they're doing their work remotely for the corporations that they're interning with. But that also means that 20% of our young professionals are not employed, but they've got solid experience, and just like Harris over this past year, and they're ready to work. And so these young professionals are employees of Genesys Works. So it's a simple contract with any company interested in partnering with them. And so I think our 2019 annual impact report is now in the Chatterbox. If you'd like to take a look at it, we'd love to have a conversation with you if you'd like to explore anything. And my final point would be that, I was in Houston in the 80s when the oil industry boom went bust, and Houston always bounces back. And at Genesys Works, we have a group of hungry, talented, and diverse group of people who grew up here, who want to stay here, and we can help you with your tech and business operation needs, not only today, but into the future. So thanks, Hunter.
Hey, David, thank you so much. Proud Houstonian, love it, and proud to be at Genesys Works again as a CEO. A couple logos that you're working with across the country. I know Target up in Minneapolis. Who else?
Salesforce, AT&T, 3M, just so really big companies. We work with nearly 250.
Awesome.
So ones that you've heard, and then a lot that maybe you haven't.
How can people reach out and get connected to you at Genesys Works?
So certainly on that annual report, they can certainly contact me. Maybe that's just the easiest way. dwilliams@genesysworks.org. We'll start there.
David, thank you so much for coming on the program. We're looking forward to working with you across North America in our 30 markets. Thanks again. Great to see you.
Thank you, Hunter. I really appreciate it.
Take care. Be safe.
Thanks.
Next up, we have our thought leader, Brandon Traffanstedt from Cyber-Ark. He's the global director and systems engineer, over a decade of experience from a technical point of view. Cyber-Ark, a little bit about Cyber-Ark, folks. Global footprint, interesting company, public in 2015, 5,300 customers, 50% of the Fortune 500 use Cyber-Ark, 30% of the Global 2000. Global footprint in US, Israel, UK, all the way to France, Germany, Italy, and Japan. Focus on mission critical software and helping companies innovate in the privileged account security space. Brandon, welcome.
Hey, Hunter, and hey, everyone. Glad to be here.
Great to see you. Dive into this space. It's a really interesting space around privileged access security and why it's so relevant. I had a chance to look at your CEO's video on your website, Udi Mokhati, and he's got a fascinating point of view around the whole mission of CyberArk. What's the mission of CyberArk?
So our goal is to secure privileged access. And what that privileged access means is that every single system, no matter what, has a privileged credential associated with managing it. Many of your organizations may think of Windows systems, Unix, network devices, databases, all kinds of stuff, including SCADA systems, PLCs, and things of that nature. So attackers look to get access to these privileged secrets because that's how breaches occur. There's no breach that happens with least privilege. This even extends out into the cloud and with non-human users, robots, and applications. So our mission is to help you find them, secure them, rotate them programmatically, and provide attestation and monitoring for people and non-people who need access to them.
So Brandon, go a little further. Let's click down on that. Why is privileged access so important, and how CyberArk protects that wrapper as the bad guys get in, as they penetrate the enterprise?
So bad guys are unique in that they're creative. But one thing that hasn't changed in terms of attackers changing and pivoting and using more automated attack tools and more ransomware, the thing that's remained the same is that every breach, 100% of breaches, involve privileged access. That's it, open and shut.
So talk to us. That's a fascinating stat. Love it. Thank you. And there are obviously independent research that supports that fact, right?
Absolutely.
Once they gain access and they breach the enterprise, what happens next in an attack that is unfortunately successful?
Sure. So in many cases, we start by compromising a human, one of us, right? These days, humans have changed a little bit. We're still very security conscious at heart. We're still very trusting, and that's great. But many of us have moved from our offices to home. And the thing about home is it's a great place to be, but there are lots of distractions that maybe change our perception of whether or not we should click that link, or whether or not we should send that proprietary company information to location X, Y, or Z. So attackers take advantage of us being trusting humans and then begin to do things like elevate their privileges. For instance, if I were given local administrative rights on my laptop, that is a perfect spot for an attacker to start dumping more potential hashes, moving laterally to other systems in the environment, continuing to elevate until they found the data that they wish to exfiltrate, found a very critical system that they can use to disrupt business, or even worse, sometimes combining those together. And this doesn't just exist in your on-prem assets, right? The old school stuff. This can be privileged storage in the cloud. It can even be your company's social media accounts, where if you're relationship based, while it's not going to end the world, it can seriously hurt the business. But not only that, break the trust of your customer base.
You know, Uday, your CEO, really talks about investing in innovation. And I got to believe that's really the key to staying ahead of the bad guys, the nation states that are really on attack. Since COVID-19 has swept across the globe, there's been a rise or a spike in attacks. Any comments on that?
Yeah, definitely. So we've seen some big shifts. Naturally, attacks have gone up. We see a lot more social engineering happen, but at the same time, we see a lot more compromises based on limited sort of network boundaries. And I'll give you an example of that. CyberArk, as part of our R&D group, has a labs division, a group of engineers whose only job is to look at emerging threats, design free utilities, and also help drive the innovation of our platform. What we're finding is many of your remote end users are connecting through using things like VPN and VDI-based approaches. And many of you have likely seen a spike in usage to where you're struggling to get more licenses and get things configured. But even if you do have, say, a VPN connection, a tunnel into the innards of your environment, in many cases, we're setting up these things so quickly that we're not putting the adequate network boundaries around them. So one of the things that we've been focusing on quite recently, and we've seen a lot of adoption from our customer base, is on the ability to securely allow for that remote access using things like biometric authentication in an end user's device. So whether it's one of your users who happen to be in a coffee shop, or maybe one of your third-party vendors you're trusting for getting privileged access to your stuff and doing work for you, we can add some additional security to augment those workflows while keeping things native. So that's been a big key, making sure things are native, making sure things just work, adding operational benefits while also reaping the benefits of higher security too.
So look, if I'm a CIO, this all sounds great, by the way. If I'm a CIO or a CISO, my CEO just wants to make sure we have a safe and secure enterprise. With so many competitors out there, what really makes CyberArk uniquely different with your clients? And I know you have industry vertical practices that you drill down in, and I think you're very strong in the energy, oil, and gas space.
So Hunter, I'll admit it. I'm a little bit biased as I'm from the engineering side. So I like bright colors and shiny lights and shiny buttons too. So it's important to have a strong technology foundation. However, having a really great piece of technology means nothing if there isn't process behind it to deploy, if we're not focusing on incredibly high value security quick wins, as well as operational ones too. So for us, I think a big differentiator is providing software, yeah, but also working with you to create a plan, to provide a blueprint that allows you to increase security posture without hurting operations. And for us, the key to that blueprint is the concept of consistency. Users should be able to connect to their stuff in the same way natively, regardless of the type of system they're connecting to. Platforms should be able to automatically onboard, and security should be proactive too. And I'll give you a quick for instance. Say I have a number of instances in AWS or whatever cloud provider you choose, and they're spinning up super rapidly. What happens if a key associated with that instance is used outside of our environment without us knowing? Well, your logging will monitor that, it'll pick it up, and it'll say, hey, something weird happened, which is reactive security. Yes, you know something's weird, and then you can go fix it. But what if your solutions could hook together to proactively remediate those risks? For instance, rotate that key pair so that, yeah, something weird happened, but we've already taken steps to mitigate the risk, to give your first responders more time to, well, respond first. And this is something, yeah, go ahead.
Help me out from a systems point of view. You're talking about how easy use and implementation across the enterprise. Mm-hmm. And in the work from home environment, what are some tips that you can give all of us, both the CISOs, CIOs, and IT leaders on the line here, to secure our home environment, working from home and connecting to the enterprise? What have you learned?
So step one, be honest with your end users. It's more than okay to talk about the challenges that you're facing, the scale that they're facing too. Again, humans, we have a tendency to understand. Cloak and dagger security works really well after a compromise, but being open with the users and telling them why it is you're doing things from a security perspective, how you think it'll make their lives easier if it's something that will. So being open is number one. You don't need technology to do that. And I realize it's kind of fluffy, but it means the world. Step two is if we've got users out there, maybe they're developers who have local administrative rights on their endpoints, whether it's a Windows device or a Mac device, and you haven't started to sort of pare some of those local admin rights back or remove them, it's a perfect place to start when we look at adding large security posture increases with relatively low amounts of effort. And again, technology can back you up there. So the final thing I'll say here is multi-factor, more important than ever. We've got lots of little hands inside homes that may not know passwords, but they can sure grab a laptop, click on stuff, move around, and try and type things. So not to say that any of our kids and pets are malicious users, but having a second factor of authentication is absolutely key here, especially as more workforce moves home.
Brandon, a little bit about the culture at CyberArk. You seem to be an incredibly well thoughtful presenter and communicator about the issues, the multiple layers and levels of issues within a complex enterprise. What's the culture like at CyberArk, and how do you delight your customers?
So we look at culture in two ways. First, there has to be passion. If we show up to build security platforms and we're not passionate about helping secure the businesses that we work with, the power providers that make sure our lights come on, the water companies that help water come through the pipes, then we've got some considerations to make. So I think passion about security and technology is key at CyberArk, but also the nature of having this passion and doing the research, but also being humble. We haven't reached the point that we have without listening to our customers. In fact, over the last 20 years of business, we've had customers come to us and say, guys, why aren't you doing it this way? Or wouldn't it be really great if you did that? And if we said, oh no, this is all we do, and you're just a customer, you're just a paycheck to us, then we would have fallen as quickly as we rose. So customer satisfaction and delight is one thing, but what does it really mean? For us, you have to be successful. We believe that from the side of passion and wanting, again, to secure the people we work with, but also if one of our customers is compromised, then CyberArk itself is compromised too. So every piece of security that we build, every program that we generate, all the free tools that we put out there, we use them ourselves to build business, and we expect that you'll use them in the same way.
Hey, Brandon, this has been a phenomenal interview. You blew me away, far exceeded my expectations, really. CyberArk folks, check them out. A top tip pick by HMG. Really impressed. Looking forward to working with you again in the future, Brandon. Thanks for coming on the program today.
Thanks, Hunter. Thanks, everyone. It's been a pleasure.
Take care. Great. Next up, leading in a crisis. Leading in a crisis, and I can't think of a better individual on a global level than my dear friend, colleague, and peer we've been collaborating with together now for 12 years, Snehal Antani former CTO of the DoD, former CIO at both GE, IBM, as well as CTO at Splunk. Snehal, welcome to the program.
All right, thank you.
Good morning. I know it's early for you out in San Francisco. Thanks for getting up and joining us here today.
Yeah, I know it's funny. Somehow my toddler can shoulder surf and get my home credentials. So I think the CyberArk point is that your passwords are very important to protect.
Great, thank you very much. Hey, Snehal, give us a little context about your point of view on this global crisis we're leading through right now. And what do you think really matters regarding being successful as a leader in the enterprise? Some tips, and feel free, if you have some slides to share, feel free to share some slides. I'll leave it up to you.
Yeah, great. So I think that there's this famous quote that crisis doesn't make leaders, crisis reveals leaders. And crisis will arise in many forms. On a day-to-day basis as a CIO, it could be your IT outage or your security breach. It could be a tragedy that's occurred within your community. It could be something like this, where you are suddenly scrambling to support work from home and so on. How you lead during that crisis is incredibly important. And what I've found personally is that as a leader during crisis, you fall into one of two extremes. You either lead as a dictator or you lead as an enabler. And so for all of us, as we go through this process, having that honest reflection of how we perform and how do we continuously make sure we get better so that we can lead our teams, we can lead ourselves, and we can make sure that our organizations are successful.
And you're really good at what you do. These are really big, heady topics. How do you go into the self-reflective point? Show the viewers your model of self-reflection during, after an event.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you guys can see my slides, what I go through, and I try to do this for a variety of scenarios, is there are a series of questions I will ask myself post-crisis or post any major event. Was I acting as a dictator or was I acting as an enabler? And when you think of acting as a dictator, that means you are directive. You are telling everybody what to do. Your team is waiting on your every task issuance and so on. As an enabler, your job is to empower those closest to the problem to get the job done. And your job is to make sure they've got the resources, that you're blocking for them. And so for me personally, I will start to ask myself these types of questions. Was I a dictator or was I an enabler? Was my team waiting on each of my decisions, or did they feel empowered to move out? Was my intent clear? Did I have clear vision, clear purpose, or was there a lot of ambiguity? And if you have ambiguity, you've got a number of folks that think they know what to do that are scattered going off in their own directions. And when that occurs, you have disagreement within the teams. And did you as a leader allow that disagreement to fester? Or did you focus instead on making sure that you could troop lead through those situations and get people on the same page? Was it obvious to everybody who owned a decision versus who was an advisor to that decision? If everyone thinks they own the decision, that'll also lead to a bit of chaos. And you can see the other questions that I will go through here. One of the things I learned as I left industry to serve within the Department of Defense is the value and importance of a cadence and a heartbeat of the organization. Where as a leader, you want to manage individuals or those empowered quarterbacks and teams to innovate and be creative. But at the end, you can allow some drift from the vision and intent, but the heartbeat, the cadence, the morning stand-ups or the 3-day-a-week synchronization meetings that get everyone on the same page is what allows you to balance innovation and drift with cohesion and execution. And finally, do you train in how you fight? This is another thing I learned during my time serving, is everything works in PowerPoint, but you have to go through the motions of having everyone suddenly work from home, or having your disaster recovery processes execute, or your breach tabletop exercises execute, so that it is obvious to people the problems to go solve, and they're not dealing with these issues for the first time. They have some muscle memory from there, how do we make sure we empower the right folks to execute? Everything we did in our digital transformation within the DoD was with the same folks that worked there 2 years ago. All we did was give them vision, surge resources and empower them, and then get out of their way. And then we drove accountability through cadence. So I think the first major takeaway is, as a leader, how do you ensure unity of effort? And then you can see the other key takeaways, which we can dive into. But the other big epiphany for me was the skills of leading through a crisis overlap significantly with the skills required to lead a digital transformation. And for me, I always thought of those as completely separate traits. But as we went through it, I realized that you've got to know how to empower the right people. You've got to hack through bureaucracy. You've got to be able to create that team chemistry. You've got to troop lead and leave rank at the door at every possible chance to make sure that you can work through hard problems together. And that was probably my biggest personal takeaway through this.
Excellent, Snehal. Thank you very much. Your next chapter is a startup. 1 minute on that.
Yeah, so going from large companies like GE and Splunk, or the Department of Defense, where you've got a very large budget to execute, to founding a venture-backed startup where I'm deciding what not to do on a daily basis is yet another set of leadership skills I'm going to quickly have to learn and master. But what I saw within the my industry experience and my government experience is within cybersecurity, how do we start to understand our enterprise through the eyes of the attacker? And how do we use offensive tactics? So hackers' approach to how they recon my environment, a hacker approach to how they attack my environment, and how do I run continuous automated red teaming against my enterprise so I can understand what does my cyber terrain look like, where do I prioritize my defensive efforts, and how do I, once again, train like I fight and exercise my controls. So I started a company called Horizon 3. We do red teaming as a service, and it's, once again, yet another area of growth and lessons learned that I'll be able to share with the community as I go through this journey.
Thank you, Snehal. Always great to see you. Really appreciate your support and engagement. Ladies and gentlemen, Snehal Antani, a brilliant thought leader in our industry, and thank you for your service to our country. Really appreciate it, Snehal. Okay, next up, folks, is our panel, Leading Courageously Through a Crisis. And first up, Jennifer Hartsock, VP and CIO of Baker Hughes. Jennifer has an amazing career as a CIO, 3 years with Baker Hughes, a year and a half with GE, a year with Cameron, and wow, 17 years as the group CIO at Caterpillar as she rose through the ranks. Jennifer, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Hunter.
Good to see you again. Thank
nice
you for making
seeing
it.
you as well. Yeah, absolutely.
It's been a few years. Looking forward to seeing you on my next trip to Houston.
Well, we welcome you when you have a chance to get down here and we get some of these restrictions lifted and everyone can travel safely.
Excellent. So just a little bit of a sidebar here before we dive into the interview. Genesys Works. Are you familiar with those folks?
Absolutely. We've been a partner of Genesys Works for years, and we have some really fantastic students that have been a part of our team doing precisely what we shared earlier when they're doing some end user support, laptop builds, testing. They're doing some really great work for us and really proud of the partnership we have with them.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate the plug for David and the team. When you think about courage and leadership, and you think back through your career at different points, different inflection points, what are you feeling now? What did you learn the past 6 to 8 weeks, and how you leading and leaning into the market, into the business, and into growing your team?
Absolutely. And I think that, it's a really unique period. And I think that many of us here in Houston can relate to this, is that we're dealing with a double crisis. One that is certainly the pandemic and dealing with COVID, which for us started when Asia started to have the outbreak way back in January. So already understanding how to adapt and support business continuity at that moment. But at that point, it was reasonably limited. And then as it started to expand, we have heavy operations in Europe. We operate in 120 countries. So as the pandemic started to spread, the impact started to spread, and our response did the same. And then in March, we had the beginning of an incredibly difficult period with the oil price war and understanding what the drop off in demand was going to do economically to our business as well. So if it weren't enough for our IT organization to face into how to transfer everyone to a remote work scenario, how do we support that securely? How do we support productivity and business continuity while maintaining the safety of our employees? We're an essential service that had to continue to operate in countries around the world and deal with an economic crisis in our market as well. So we've got growth in some regions, we have fall off in others, and how do you cope with all of that? And, candidly, I really appreciated some of the thoughts we just heard, because it really is about how do you cope with all of this reality, which transparently we have almost no independent control over, and then get your teams to understand and acknowledge that reality, and then focus on what we can control, focus on the go forward, and help protect them as best we can. So it's everything from, like I said, just transparently acknowledging that reality, having the humility to share where we're still figuring out answers and having the transparency to work through that. But I think it's also acknowledging that when we try things and it doesn't work, we acknowledge that. I'll be the first person to admit I have been a huge fan of co-located agile development teams, which has created great productivity and great transformational opportunities for our team and our business. And that is inclusive of co-locating both the software engineering teams as well as business process experts together to accelerate change. We've had to rethink that in the last several weeks, because we certainly couldn't afford to put the brakes on productivity and transformation. If anything, we're trying to accelerate that transformation in the current period. And so we had to get really creative, and I had to break my own biases and admit that I was breaking my own biases and how I approached that, and saying, maybe my preference for co-located teams might have been false. And now that we have everybody working remotely, this probably is something that we can support longer term. So I think it has a multitude of angles, but it really starts with us as leaders transparently showing up, helping the team focus on what matters. And then I think, as we shared, get the heck out of their way and help them be successful.
Jennifer, it sounds like you didn't miss a beat on this as you track the virus across the globe. How will this pandemic change the work from home, work from remote work style forever?
And I think that for forever is, of course, I think we're all measuring ourselves a little bit in dog years right now. So forever is a very big, huge question mark in my mind. But we started to prepare our knowledge workers that for the foreseeable future, as in 2020 and beyond, a vast majority of us should consider working from home as a semi-permanent thing. Now, as the pandemic allows and as the restrictions ease and we can safely get people into work for maybe some ideation sessions or episodic collaboration, but they're still going to go back to work from home as much as possible, because we do have a number of folks in our workforce that physically must be present to do their jobs. That'd be manufacturing, service related, that type of work. And if we can keep the density in those locations reserved for those folks that have critical need by having us as knowledge workers remote work more long term, we're prepared to do that. So I think it is going to be a new normal. And if anything, I think it has huge opportunities for us when we think about diversity of talent, because now we can cast our net even wider, because location is no longer a restriction for us being able to tap into talent. And I think that it has the opportunity to really fundamentally put even more importance on digital tools and capabilities to keep people connected, to drive productivity, and to help our heavy technology and engineering organizations stay incredibly creative and innovative, even in this world, which I think is becoming the new normal.
Agreed. Do you have any best practices for remote work for us?
Yeah, and I'm still trying to figure it out myself. So I'm certainly looking forward to hearing from the other panelists to understand if they've got any best practices that we can apply. But I think that's one of the best practices, is how do we share with our colleagues what's working and what isn't working, because there is no one size fits all. And we talked about it, we got some folks that have got kids that have to figure out how to do the homeschooling thing. You've got others that have maybe are in elder care situations. You have others that are remote from their families, and that creates some challenges. Everyone's got a story. So I think that one of our best practices is to not lose track of the humanity in all of this. So schedule the coffee breaks, schedule the happy hours, make sure you're staying personally connected with people on your team. I'm a big fan. We went from a pilot of, we have a lot of complexity here at Baker Hughes, inclusive of continuing to separate us some shared services from General Electric, who used to be our majority shareholder. So we're doing all this work, accelerated our Microsoft Teams deployment from 500 pilot users at the beginning of March to a full deployment by the end of April. So in like 7 weeks, we went from 500 to like over 10,000 users, actually now over 20,000 users on the tool. So I think that we have to think about how do we shift paradigms of speed so that we can help support that. So anything we can do to help people stay connected, stay empowered, and stay effective is really where our best practices are. Now, the best practice I'm looking for help on, this is, I think, us as leaders, is I'm still struggling with work-life balance in this scenario. I feel like the day doesn't really end. And I said that's probably one of the things that I'm trying to make sure that we instill in our best practices as leaders is watching for those warning signs in our teams to say where they're starting to burn a little hot, where do we need to encourage them to take a bit of a break, and then where do we might need to make sure that they're aware of the multitude of tools that our companies have to offer to help protect their mental health. For us, an employee assistance program, it comes up on every one of my town halls to make sure people remember that when it becomes too much, we've got a whole multitude of services available to keep people healthy and engaged.
Jennifer, thank you so much. We'll come back to you in a minute. You've always blown me away. You're an amazing professional executive communicator, and thank you for being a HMG CIO Transformational CIO of the Year Award recipient. We'll be back to you in a minute. Next up is Venu Madduri, CIO of Mears Group. Venu has been with Mears for 5 years. Before that, 2.5 years as a CIO at Ignite Restaurant Group. Before that, 1.5 years at NCL Group. And before that, 8 years at Ruby Tuesdays. Venu, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Hunter.
Great to see you. So give us an update. How have you responded to this crisis? What was your go-to when you first really began to track it across the globe? And what were the lessons learned that you can share with the team here?
Couple of things. I mean, we didn't see it as early as Jennifer has said, but we did see a little earlier than others. So probably somewhere in mid-February, we started planning our disaster recovery and business continuity planning. Some of the folks in the office were like, isn't this too early for you? But we went ahead, we kept our planning, which was good. What we have seen is we have a saying in our team. I've read an English proverb once, and we stick to it. We say it a lot of times is, courage is not the lack of fear, but character in the presence of it. These are unprecedented times. None of us has seen this. We don't have a playbook to play with. So we are all trying to dip into the sum total of our experience over the years and say, okay, how do I handle this? For some in the team, this is a lot of uncertainty. And uncertainty is what breeds a lot of confusion among themselves. People start thinking differently, people start acting differently. So the one thing that we told all the IT leaders across the board, my direct reportees and everybody else is be bold, be present, be visible. Gone are the days when we used to have only voice calls. Now get on the video call, be present, let people see you. Because seeing is a little bit of reassuring for the team members that, okay, we are with a leader, we are with a guy that is humane enough, understands the challenges. And you also start fostering some discussion among the team members. Couple of examples that we have done in our team is, you take Sweden, for example, it's the country Sweden, which is between Finland and Norway, which have gone into a lockdown, and Sweden has not. So we started using those examples to say, hey, let's start appreciating some contrarian ideas. That's the key that I'm trying to tell the team is appreciate contrarian ideas. Don't just walk into a meeting and say, well, this is how it is, or this is what the majority is. If one guy has an idea, speak up. Maybe we all haven't seen this before. So appreciate contrarian ideas.
Were you able to learn something from the Sweden model?
Yeah, I mean, especially as, we have been asked to cut our budgets like everybody else. We are in the oil industry. We are a service provider to the oil industry. So we, like Jennifer said, we are facing a double whammy. So what we have done is we took a contrarian approach and we cut our production support team more than our innovation team, because we think we're going to come out of this crisis only if we innovate. So we said, okay, well, we're going to cut our production support team and spend more on the innovation, and anything that has an ROI in the next 12 to 18 months, we're just going to stick with those projects. And if possible, we're going to invest more into those projects. Because at the end of the day, 2021 is going to happen, whether we keep our just focus on blocking and tackling techniques or not, or innovate. 2021 is going to happen. So don't take your eye off of 2021. Spend some time understanding where this business is going to be in 2021, and then walk backwards from there to say, okay, what are the technologies, tools, and systems that need to be prevalent? The people, the process, and the projects that need to be continued so that we can face 2021 more boldly than going into this fetal position and trying to crouch ourselves. We need to get out of this thing. So that's that contrarian approach that Sweden has taken. We are trying to imbibe that in the team. Not everybody is in that mode. So we're trying to have a balance of both sides.
So you kept a really positive pivot out of this whole crisis for your company and your organization.
Absolutely. And we are like a startup. I mean, imagine we are a startup in this business. Startups face these kinds of issues, like Snehal said, on a daily basis. Startups can plan only for a month. We used to plan for a 3-year plan strategy translating into a year plan and all that stuff. We don't do that anymore. We are living by the week in some days, in some situations living by the day. So just think like a startup. Think what you can do better. And the one thing that helped us is we were already quite distributed. So we started decentralizing the decision-making process. And for the folks on, for the participants here, as a leader, the one thing I started looking at, and if I can give you any advice, is innovation. Look for that contrarian approach, and then look for decision gaps. We lost some people through the process of RIFs and other things, which has led to decision gaps. So if you have a decision gap, that starts again to breed uncertainty and complexity into the process. So, jump in, help the people make a decision, ask them to be bold. There is no right or wrong decision. We all live by the audit systems that we have, SOX and other audits. So most people know how to make a good decision. So empower them. If it's a good decision, celebrate it. If it's a bad decision, as a leader, take the blame and move on. So, make those decisions, find those gaps, make those decisions. And
so,
I think
how do you lead boldly and be grateful and be humble? It's an interesting paradox, right?
Yes. It's being human. If I were in their shoes, what would happen? Number one. Number two, on these calls, I tend to say, there is nothing wrong in saying I don't know, because there is a benefit in collective wisdom. Does anybody have a better idea here? I just have a role and a title, but I'm as human as you guys are. I haven't seen any other situation like this. So collectively, can we come to a decision on this thing? So being humble with the team.
Yeah, excellent, Venu. We'll be back to you in just a minute. Next up is Marie Mears. Marie, welcome to the company. Global CDO of HP. Back to HP now for 3 months after being at UiPath and then previously at HP for 15 years. Welcome.
Let me say good morning, Hunter. How are you? Sorry, I had my mute button there. One of the things we had to learn is how to unmute quickly.
That's good. Good morning. That happens to me all the time. So I feel better. So hopefully you feel good too as well. Thank you for being here. You have an amazing background in tech. Really blows me away. Give us an idea, like what really matters to you now? What are you thinking about? What are you going through, and how are you leading your team at HP, right, in a pretty challenging market?
Yeah, no, it's pretty interesting story, actually. I started back at HP literally 2 weeks before the shutdown. So onboarding and coming back to be the CDO of the company amidst all of this was something I just wasn't expecting. And it certainly challenged leadership and my own leadership and myself in ways I hadn't anticipated. But just to answer your question, I think you look right now, I'm really personally focused, and the company's really focused on just accelerating digital transformation. And a big piece of that, I think all of us, and you've heard from many of the panelists, have been really thrown into this whole world of virtual work. I mean, I think before this, many of us were experimenting with what virtual work meant, how to do it. We were learning how to use Zoom. And today, I would say that it's becoming it's becoming permanent. And in fact, I just read earlier today that, the ServiceNow CEO, Bill McDermott, who I'm a big, I admire Bill a whole lot, came out and said, look, companies are going to spend around $7 trillion by 2023 on digitizing, their business, digitizing work. So to me, this is kind of like one of the headlines from this whole COVID crisis. I think the way we're working now is in many ways going to become a permanent fixture. And so, there's a whole new ecosystem that really opens up, Hunter, in terms of, a lot of the folks here on the phone, whether from a CIO perspective or from, what I've got at home. I'm in a house of 8 people right now. We've got 5 kids. We're all learning how to deal with bandwidth sharing. My children, my teenagers are trying to steal my laptops. Before, all they cared about was my iPhone. I've got the 11 Pro. Probably that's one of the things I don't like about Zoom is that they loved this, but now they're kind of gawking at my laptops where I've got great cameras because they want to be able to have Zoom calls that really work. So, it's a whole changing paradigm that's out there, and it's happening very quickly. I think most of us were never able to make changes in this kind of the speed that we've got going on as well. So that's what's top of mind for me right now: digital transformation and changing the way we work.
So, question for you: there's this notion of there's a CIO in an enterprise, and there's the CDO, and really it's about business value and business transformation, reinventing new markets. We call it lead, reimagine, reinvent, core, parallel, new markets. Talk to us a little bit about that whole reimagine a go-to-market and how you help the C-suite at HP reimagine the future, reinvent. It's your term, right?
Yeah, no, actually we kind of coined reinvent, so I love it, and I love that you're using it actually. So look, in some ways, this crisis has created a burning platform for HP, and I think for everybody here today. I mean, I think about how I consume and how you're consuming today, Hunter. We're working virtually and we're consuming online, right? So online, we would argue it was important. We were getting there. Now that this COVID crisis has literally just moved us all to online consumption. I know in Texas, we're opening up the shopping mall on Friday, but I can tell you guys, I'm not going. I'm going to stick with my online strategy. What that means is that customers and companies like HP need to quickly move our business model to that online, consumption. We had sort of, less than 10, 50% of our business that was truthfully online. And now we need to figure out a way to really pivot extremely quickly to online. And so as a CDO, that's a top of mind concern, right? I mean, we've got to figure out how to get infrastructure, how to drive our business. We've been struggling to meet laptop demand, and customers want to be able to, interact with you in a way that they haven't interacted in the past. So these are all new challenges for companies, I think, out there today. And you just don't have time. The other piece of this, Hunter, is there's no time anymore. We're making decisions. We're in crisis leadership. So you're having to make decisions, build quickly in ways that you've never had before.
In crisis leadership, at this point in time, how do you know you're in the zone? When do you know you're in the zone and you're really, as Snehal says, you're acting balanced and not reacting, but you're proactively leading, and your sensors, you're visually looking at the data and you're making the right decisions. When do you know you're in the zone? It's a really important point here.
Yeah, no, look, I go back to one of my favorite quotes, which is Winston Churchill, which is, you know what? Never waste a good crisis. So, I think we have incredible opportunities to be in the zone, as you put it, in this crisis moment. I personally, and I'm just going to kind of take it down to a personal level, how do I know when I'm in the zone is when I'm, first of all, I've got to be authentic. You can't kind of make this stuff up. I think you have to be real. And I think as some of the panelists have said, it's okay to admit you just don't know and kind of work through it with the team. I think you have to be able to keep your eye on the target. You have to find a way to keep your team incredibly motivated, which is not easy when people are at home dealing with a lot of complexity, including their own health. So you have to be able to acknowledge the difficulty that we're all in, and the fact that a lot of cases this stuff is really personal. So, but I think the other piece is you've got to find a way to really have authentic confidence so you can lift people up, that there is hope, there is optimism here, and that we're going to get through this, and we're going to be able to do exciting things that we've never been able to do before. So I get in the zone by pushing through and actually delivering on, value in ways that we haven't been able to do before. So I try to look for the kind of silver lining in the cloud, I suppose, like the fact that we were able to move Zoom usage from a handful of folks to, tens of thousands a day. That's a great example of how I personally move the team into the zone.
It's fascinating what the adoption of a Zoom, when the culture becomes all Zoomites, right? And they're on Zoom 24/7, right? So a little bit about balance, life balance. How do you shut it down at night?
I personally have really never, my husband thinks it's terrible because I stay up, do calls 9, 10, 30, 11 at night. We're globally distributed all over the world, fragmented supply chain. We've got it all that complexity, we've got it all going on. I have never really struggled with switching off work. I work really long hours, but when I shut it down, I shut it down. I've got a huge family. So, I've got kids screaming, I've got my mother in Australia. I've got lots of pull on my time, and I've got girlfriends who, you ignore me. So when I shut off for the day, I shut off, have a glass of wine. I must admit, I probably have more wine now than I had pre-COVID. But I've learned that you've got to shut down. I'm a big spinner. I love exercising. You'll see me on the Allen Parkway in Houston riding my bike at 6 a.m. So, I find ways, I find balance. I've learned how to do that. I'm not a young spring chick. I'm not a spring chicken anymore. So I figured it out. I think it's important.
Well, welcome to the program. You blew me away, Marie. Great to meet you as well. And thank you for the introduction from Antonio. Stay with us. We'll circle back to you. Next up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Krueger, the VP of IT and CIO of JB Poindexter. Paul, welcome to the program. Great to see you. It's always good to see you, my friend. I love your energy. You're always happy and smiling. What is the secret? You look great. You don't age. You look great.
Well, thanks. I really appreciate that. But before I started here, I was probably about 6 feet tall. Now I'm about maybe 5'10".
So living in Houston for so long, what's your take on this current crisis? Give us some context.
Yeah, well, so in Houston, we're used to having natural disasters, right? So yes, we're used to being prepared for hurricanes and being prepared to handle those things. But there's a lot of similarities and differences to that, right? So one of the similarities, of course, is you're going to have an increased number of remote workers. You're going to have to focus on efficiencies with those remote workers and that. You're going to have to increase your communications, as a lot of the panelists said. You're going to focus on employee morale because a lot of people have fear, they're worried, those types of things. And you're going to have to be understanding and be flexible with employee issues. Not every employee is going to be treated the same. And the biggest thing is you got to continue to build and maintain trust. And one of the ways to do that is, of course, make sure your people know that this is your time to shine, right? Everybody remembers where they were on 9/11. Everybody remembers where they were when Hurricane Harvey hit. They will remember that when times get bad. And also they'll say, oh yeah, man, Joe was there for us. He was there, right? And that could be the difference in you keeping your job during a downturn. Right? The other thing is this is the time for us to shine as a group because this also helps us get additional capital and money because at GE, we used to call it the say-do ratio, right? So here, as long as we're doing what we're saying, making things happen, it doesn't matter if you got a marginal ROI, they're going to believe in you and they're going to go forward with those projects and they're going to go forward with those things. So those are all the similarities. The difference is with the hurricane, you're prepared for a physical disruption. You have redundancies in place. You're able to simulate that, right? You can walk into a conference room and put your hand on the table and say, okay, a hurricane just hit, you and you are not available. We got to go to our DR. Boom, easy to do. I have no idea how to simulate a pandemic. If somebody does, please tell me. And the other thing is it's a local condition and it's short term, right? It's not nationwide, it's not worldwide, and you're only focused on something for a few days. And what you're focused on is get back to a steady state. Here, you've got an unknown future state. Are we preparing for a strong recovery or are we preparing for a long, hard road? Also, there's going to be new opportunities, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And we have to understand what our new opportunities are as a business, develop those shared goals, and help the organization come back stronger than our competitors, which is what we're focused on right now.
How are you doing that? I love that mantra. How are you making sure you're going to come out stronger and more innovative and more bold in the market?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting, and our culture here in our organization is probably a little bit different than some of the other panelists in that. Our CEO is a decorated Vietnam veteran. He's got a couple of Purple Hearts, a couple of Silver Stars. His mantra is, we're shoulder to shoulder with the guys in manufacturing. So all office workers, unless you've got a good excuse, you know, you're a single parent with a child at home, you have a medical condition. Other than that, you've got your mask and you're coming to work, right? And we're going to work together and we're going to get through this, right? As a team, working together. So one of the ways that we're focused on leading that right now is automation. I have yet to hear of a case where it went man to machine. I don't know that the coronavirus has been able to do that yet. So with that, we are kind of resurrecting a lot of these old automation projects. I shouldn't say old, but the ones that weren't quite ready for prime time, right? The 3D printers, the automated welders, the RFID, the Internet of Things, all those things for the shop floor. And then RPA for office and clerical areas. In fact, right after this, I've got a meeting on RPA project that we're kicking off. So those are the areas we're leading. Where we're assisting is we're focusing a lot on analytics. Our business analysts are busy as can be, right? We're doing a lot of what ifs and simulations with the business, right? Also, we've increased our e-commerce. If you go to, and people are probably not familiar with JB Poindexter. One of the things what JB Poindexter does is we're in transportation. So next time you see one of those UPS trucks go down the street and you wonder who built it, that's us. Next time you see one of those FedEx trucks go down the street, that's us. Mail carriers, Ryder, Penske, you name it, it's probably built by us. So one of the things, we've increased our e-commerce, especially for our parts. So if you go to morganolsonparts.com, you'll see now you can put in the VIN number of your truck. It'll show you all your parts. Before, you had to call. Well, those may not be as staffed as well. So this way, we can continue to sell those parts. Also, we're working on ways to be more agile and improve our ability to quickly scale. There's a lot of things that we're doing here internally within IT to be able to handle that. Our voice over IP usage has gone up 250%. WebEx usage has gone up 700%. Even though we have a lot of people coming into the office, there's still where we can only have 5 people in a conference room. People are sitting in their offices and they only get together if they really need to, and they need that quick answer and quick response. Because one of the things from a remote standpoint, your meetings go great, your workshops go great. The follow-ups take much longer, right? Because you can't just walk next door and you can't have that quick answer. You have to, call the guy, set up another WebEx, whatever it is.
Excellent, Paul.
Yeah. So those are the things we're doing.
Great update. Thank you so much for being here today. I want to invite all the panelists to the main screen, to the main panel. Nikki, everyone can turn their camera on. That'd be great. Let's go back to Jennifer. Leading boldly in a time of crisis with humility and grace, but leading boldly with an innovative mindset. What comes to mind? And maybe we'll go down the panelists, get a build on this idea.
Yeah, I think that we have to allow this to, just as Marie indicated, not to waste this crisis, allowed to challenge our paradigms. So great examples, I would say, that we allowed to push through that were maybe they were great ideas, but hadn't necessarily gotten the playtime they deserved. We have seen an incredible embrace of remote factory test validation by our customers, using virtual reality and augmented reality to assist with virtual service interventions, and lots of ways that are just fundamentally transforming how work gets done, because we had no other choice. It's technology we knew was great, we knew had an application, but perhaps was running into cultural resistance that it's just evaporated over the last couple of months. So I'd say leading boldly means that we have to be knowing when to put our foot on the gas to accelerate change we knew had value, but maybe was maybe prohibited from getting the traction it deserved, and be willing to stand up in front of our leaders and challenge things like, can't we move faster? What are our barriers? How do we remove them? How do we balance security But also remember, we have a business to run and we have continuity we have to support at the same time.
Excellent. Love it. Thank you. Venu, over to you. Thoughts around interesting technologies that are helping you reopen or stay open in keeping business and growing the culture?
A couple of things. I mean, I think coming out of the crisis, COVID crisis at least, people would not be comfortable handling paper because nobody knows how long this virus sticks to paper and stays on paper. So we are trying to eliminate any paper from traveling from our various field offices back to the back office locations, whether it's types of invoices, subcontractor bills, our own like that. Those were the last bastions. They kind of clung onto their paper environments forever. We are trying to get rid of them on one front. On the other side, what we are seeing is, with our supply chain, usually in good times, the supply chain takes over, provides you material, and also they assume risk on your behalf. You outsource risk. But in times like this, we are seeing that the risk floats back to you. So we are not only having to help our internal folks, our own employees and our own processes, but we are having to dip into our supply chain and ask those questions saying, hey, tell us, talk to us, how's your business continuity? How are you handling your own internal processes, and what risks will bubble back to us that we need to be aware and we need to be proactively taking care of. So innovation is not just happening within our enterprise, but trying to help our subcontractors and our subs, because they are very important to keep the business going. And when we come out of this crisis, I think then we will start looking at offloading some of these risks, but we are assuming the risks from our supply chain now.
Excellent. Thank you, Venu. Hey, Paul, back to you. This culture of winning and being one team, to use that military scenario, is climbing the hill with one team and looking to win, right? Shoulder to shoulder. One more comment, final comment on that idea, Paul?
Yeah. So yes, that's exactly what, from the team standpoint and working together, it's really important. We are focused to try to get ahead of our competitors during this time. Gartner uses the term accelerating out of the turns. We are very much in that guard. We're building a plant right now out in Virginia. In fact, I've got some local network guys that drove over there that are setting up all the networks and getting everything so we can have that plant up and running, so that when we come out of this, we can be producing more delivery vehicles. So that right now we've got, as you guys know, home delivery has increased, and we've got a lot of our customers asking for us to build more, and we see this as a real opportunity for our company. And so I'm just really excited, to get out of this and to get on with things. And I'm really excited to see what the future is going to bring, because I think there's going to be a lot of good opportunities coming forward.
I love the positivity, Paul. Thank you so much for being here today. And Jennifer, final word around winning. How do you win out of this situation, and what does that look like in the next 6 to 18 months? Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, in oil and gas, I'd say winning looks a lot like, that we figure out how to help support the energy transition, but also continue to support the incredible demands of energy through all of this uncertainty. So that means that we have to continue to innovate, continue to change, and continue to adapt to the environment around us, which, just like Paul said, requires a level of positivity and innovation. Also, it requires a fair amount of inspirational and courageous leadership. So absolutely timely, Hunter, that you brought this to the stage, because I think that's going to be our biggest opportunity and responsibility as leaders over the next 12 to 18 months, is to maintain that energy level so our teams can continue to contribute at the level we know is possible.
Yeah, I was speaking with Jerry Martin Flickinger, the global CTO at Starbucks, and she said, hey, Hunter, this isn't a sprint, this is a marathon.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you very much, Jennifer. Really appreciate your coming on the program today. Thank you very much. Venu, final word, sir?
Just a couple of things. One, strong relationships with our C-suite have really helped provide a unified message across the board. Message to participants, build your relationships, anchor those relationships even more, because you want to come across as one team, along with your CFO, your chief people officer, and others. And wish and a prayer for the 30 million people who are out of jobs. I hope they land softly, and I hope they get back to gainful employment pretty soon.
Great thoughts and comments. Venu, thank you so much for coming on the program today. Great rockstar panel session. Please join us. We'll be doing a CIO event with Sim in the fall in person, as well as 2021 returning with a physical in-person CIO Summit in Houston in the March, April, May timeframe. So next up, our closing session, Renee Arrington. Renee, welcome to the program today. A global partner at Pearson Partners. Renee, are you there?
I am. Hello, good morning.
Great to see you. Give us an update. What's changed in your life in the last 6 to 8 weeks, and where are you now, and where do you see the market going? You have some over 20, 30 years of experience in our industry. I'm a big fan of yours. We've had a great relationship for a decade now. Give us an update.
Sure. Thank you for that, Hunter. Gosh, it's been so interesting. You know, as someone who, I'm president of my firm, as you've said, so we had to make sure that our team was fully prepared to work remotely. Many of us could already, but as I say, we sent a couple of our administrative assistants home with a big bag of technology, right, so that they could be fully prepared to work remotely. And you know, it's working for us. We're having a great time. Our team is very productive, and we're continuing to serve our clients with excellence, which of course is always our goal. On the client front, it's been really interesting. We made our very first offer for a search we worked on with the financial services organization, where neither the candidate nor the client had met in person, right? Because the whole interview had been virtual. So that's new and different. And then last Friday, I facilitated an interview process with the board of directors where we had 5 candidates, you know, on this platform on Zoom throughout the day. And that was all virtual and new, right? So I've heard a theme from the great panelists this morning around innovation, and we are definitely seeing that in the executive search business and with our firm. So that's been fun.
Hey, Renee, you know, how do we talk about this and put this in context? Because it really is, the Houston folks, it's a double whammy. It's the global pandemic, COVID-19, and the shock to the oil system, the price of oil recently. And Houstonians are tough, and oil people are tough. Energy people they're really hardworking. How do we set a realistic context, leading boldly, leading courageously, leading authentically, leading openly with a big heart, and with grace in this really difficult time? Thoughts about leadership style that you're picking up on that are different just today than they were just 3 months ago. What's resonating for you and the candidates that you're talking to?
That is a great question, Hunter. And I think it's really, at some way, it's back to basics. You know, we've talked over the years about how important communication is in leading a team, but never more so than today. Right. So because people are dispersed and not necessarily in your offices, if you've not been accustomed to leading remote teams, communication is critical. And the ability to do that succinctly and cogently and passionately is what differentiates leaders in this time. Well, so I'd say that was one.
Let me jump in there because you nailed it. Perfect. Love it. But then let's throw another layer on it. In a digital world, whether it be WebEx, whether it be Microsoft Teams, whether it be a Zoom platform, it's completely different talking into a laptop or a computer screen, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's so funny you say that, because I suspect that every one of us on this panel today feel like we have this unintended career in the television business, right? Because we've all been on the screen a lot more than we ever thought we would be. And I'll pick up on a theme that I've heard many people say: authenticity. You have to be genuine, right? To lead virtually in this forum, you have to be genuine. You have to admit, gosh, I don't know how we're going to do this, but I do know that collectively as a team, we can solve whatever that challenge is together. So I think, you know, I've always spoken about confidence without hubris as one of the things I've said, and the many times we've had panels together. Never more important than today. You have to just check your ego at the door. This is an unprecedented time for all of us, and you just have to be real about it.
Interesting. And do you see movement and inquiries from your clients regarding looking for their next leader? What does that look like?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's really interesting. I guess we're fortunate in our firm that we have many clients who are considered essential industries, right? So that's been great because it is at the best it can be business as usual in those companies that are considered essential industries. So that's been, we've had new assignments come in, we've closed a few things. So there is movement and momentum there. But I do feel for the oil and gas industry. We have a great partner firm in Houston, Clary Napier, my friends Bill Clary and Ginger Napier are our search firm partners in the Houston market. And I feel for them right now because their focus and dominance is the energy sector. I feel for folks in retail and restaurant and hospitality because those industries have been hit hard and will continue, I think, to be hit hard. But I think the bright side of that is leaders of those industries will be looking for technology leaders that know how to turn things around, that know how to transform, that know how to watch the bottom line and, you know, cut costs in the right way. So I think we'll see an emergence of increasing importance of those skills in some of the sectors that have been hit hard.
Excellent. You know, folks say that this is a lot like leading in wartime, and it seems a little drastic, but when you really do think about it, the extremes that this whole pandemic has pushed our economy to truly is off the charts. There's nothing to chart it against unless it was a war.
No, you're right. There is no basis of comparison, and I think the phrase that I have coined, this is a context moment, right? Very much like 9/11 was a context moment. So when we look back on this, and when you look back at where you might have been placed in terms of your career ascent or your next move, anybody will recognize the context of what's happening at the time, because it is unprecedented and there is no rule book. So you just have to use your common sense, use your critical thinking skills, and lead with authenticity.
Excellent, Renee. Stay with us. Let me welcome Jamie Cummings to the program. Jamie, good morning. Welcome. Jamie's
hey,
a
Hunter,
senior
good to see you again.
Jamie's a senior partner at Korn Ferry and specializes in security, among other things. And he's been a great friend and supporter of the HMG platform and network now, probably for 6 to 10 years. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Hunter. I got my shelter-in-place beard going, so I look a little different than I normally do.
Look very handsome. I'm sure your wife loves it.
You're so kind.
So, hey, Jamie, look, there's a little piece of background, a kernel that everyone should be aware of. You do have a military background. And so yes. I really thank you for your service, by the way, number one. But number two is tell us a little bit about that background, what it was like, and how that helps you think now, lead in this crisis, but also identify other leaders that you might be working with.
Thank you, Hunter. I appreciate that. Yeah, and I think in particular, I want to feed off of what Renee mentioned, is that there are some common themes there. And I think there's reasons that we go through such intense training and they put us under stress and under duress, and whether it's sleep deprivation or otherwise, and is to see how you're going to react when things are not going well, when you are under stress, and who can be the calm in the storm, I think, right? You want to be the rock for the organization and for your team. And that's what we are really looking for, in particular, not just any leader, but security and technology leaders right now. And in fact, we have a relatively new CIO here at Korn Ferry, who ironically is a former Marine, named Brandon Johnson. And he joined late last year. And I'm sure little did he know that he would be put front and center of leadership of our firm. And I think I'd venture to guess that a lot of people prior to all this, if you'd ask them the question, if we have some sort of crisis, who's going to be at the forefront of leading and communicating to our organization what we're going to do about it and why? I don't think most people would say the chief information officer, but that's who's doing it for our $2 billion publicly traded firm. He's front and center of resiliency, business continuity. But the theme that comes to mind for me is a person who can sift out all the noise, focus on what matters, and as I already mentioned, communicate it in a confident, articulate manner. Because my experience is that if the team members see a leader who is shaky in tough times, that just can emanate throughout the team and can really have a damage on trust and confidence and their ability to operate effectively.
Thanks, Jamie. We have a question from one of our attendees, Alan Summer. Alan, great to have you on the program today. How are you balancing the need to survive in the crisis versus leveraging the crisis for innovation? When you think of candidates that you're working with and their mindset, as Renee called it, the context of going through this crisis, because it's real. Let's face it. Hopefully this crisis on this level doesn't happen again for us in our lifetime. Yeah. How do you censor folks on how they're adapting, and are they dialed in, right? Are they in the zone? As I was speaking with Mary from HP, are they in the zone? Are they acting in the zone in a flow state? It's almost like a Marine taking a hill, a pro athlete in the zone, a top tech exec leading courageously. How do you take that temperature?
Yeah, I'll take first crack at that, and Renee, please weigh in. But there's an example of someone we recruited into an industrial company who one of their focuses was they went with a chief digital information officer title, and they said we have some basic blocking and tackling to do, but we also want to move more towards e-commerce and engaging our customers more effectively. So that, not just consumer and retail, but industrial companies obviously realize that that's something they need to do. And Paul mentioned that earlier. And that was the grand plan when he got on board in January, to really work towards a digital future for the organization. And last time I spoke with them, they said, yeah, we still plan to do that, but we've had to absolutely adapt. We also needed a business continuity plan, and we adjusted our priorities. And right now that is front and center of our priorities. We'll get to the digital when we get there, but right now we need to hunker down and make sure we can not only survive the storm, but what they're putting in place is going forward a business continuity plan that they can use, not just one time, but on an ongoing basis. So I think that's a really specific example of someone who parachuted in, the situation changed, and he adapted and adjusted priorities accordingly.
Thank you, Jamie. Your CEO, Gary, has an interesting angle on leadership, and specifically leadership in a crisis. And I'm fortunate I get his newsletter weekly. I'm fascinated with his whole paradigm. What's your take on Gary's leadership in this crisis?
I'd say I think I've been pleased with the leadership of not only Gary, but Doug Charles, our president. And to me, I'm going to echo some of what Renee mentioned, is none of their decisions right now are easy. Not communicating them is not easy, but I think there has been a genuine and authentic feel to what they're doing. And they're laying things out in a way that's understandable. They're giving us the why, not just the what, as well as the path forward. And I think they've been over communicating more so than I think, my personal opinion. I've been here for about 8 years now. I think they've been doing a better job of communicating than they have in the past. And that's great, because we're now a 9,000 employee organization around the world. 3 different business units has grown through acquisition. So communication has been even more important now than ever. And I think they're doing a good job by being authentic.
Excellent. Thanks, Jamie. Let's invite Renee back to the program. Renee, probably folks don't really recognize your title and your role at Pearson. Welcome back. Come on back to the program. Thoughts on your role as a leader in the company, and how you communicate and inspire your team to lead authentically in this crisis?
Well, thank you, Hunter. I'm very fortunate that my business partner, Keith Pearson, is our chairman and CEO, and I sit as president and COO, and he and I really work hand in glove to communicate and lead our team. One thing we've been doing, which has really been fun, we've always had a weekly stand-up staff meeting, Monday mornings, 8:30, which of course is now done, on Zoom. But we've incorporated a Thursday 5 o'clock happy hour, optional, but come with your favorite beverage as a team. And so made it more of a social touch point weekly. And that really seems to have helped us. We've got a great group of folks in our firm. That really seems to have helped us keep it together, just adding in that social touch point. And then of course, we're back and forth throughout the week as we need to serve our clients with excellence. So that's one thing we've done that's been fun.
Oh, appreciate sharing that story. So when you're working with folks on in the interviewing process via Zoom or whatever the platform is, what do you look for when you're communicating with, now you're interviewing over a video platform and you're looking to see what they're, in the TV, they call it the TVQ, right? So it's how good are they communicating via a video platform, right?
Right, and it's really interesting, and I know Jamie can relate to this because he and I have talked about it. I've been doing video interviewing for a very long time. I remember when you had to go to Kinko's and you know, rent a room and have your candidate in another city go to a Kinko's and rent the room on the other side, because that was the only platform in town where you could do a video interview. So I'm comfortable in this medium, and I've been doing it for a very long time. But you do, you know, not all candidates are, Hunter, to your question. So you do look for folks that know how to communicate well, that know how to be succinct in what they say. And I think the TVQ, as you said, reading those visual cues and verbal cues is even more important when you're not in person, right? Because you could be more verbose as a candidate than I might have an appetite for. And I might be giving you, you know, verbal cues or visual cues to move on. You've got to be able to read those and pick up on those. That's even more important over video.
So top 3 items regarding leading today, leading in a crisis, what you're looking for your top 3 items for your next CIO or CTO, CISO, Renee?
Sure. I have a couple of those searches going on right now, and I always look, as you know, for confidence without hubris. You've got to be authentic and be who you are, because it comes down to culture fit. If you are not who you are when you interview through the organization's process or the process with the search firm, you're not going to fit. You're going to be a culture mismatch. So you've got to be authentic. You have to communicate well, and you have to have a track record for delivery, right? And be well respected in your industry sector and know how to get things done.
Folks, this has been a great program. Renee, thanks for coming on the program. Good to see you. We'll see you again, hopefully in person soon. Jamie, final word, thoughts? Jamie?
Now, to build on that, I would just, I think, echo what Renee said. If you're going to be a change agent within an organization, whether it's a CIO or a CISO, you have to communicate, listen first, communicate, build relationships. And I think the last thing I would say is to be a talent magnet, especially because right now, interestingly, I had a client recently that shut down a deputy CISO search about a month and a half ago. They're in the QSR industry. They came back to us last week and said, all other hiring remains frozen other than this role plus multiple others. So organizations, if they are hiring right now, it is in technology and security, and good chance others are doing it. So that talent is in high demand. You need to be someone who can attract, develop, and retain talent. So that's going to be key to success as well.
Excellent, Jamie. Jamie, thanks again for coming on today's program, folks. That's a wrap for today's program, folks. It's what a great program, the 2020 Houston Virtual CIO Summit. Hopefully you all enjoyed the program. I thought it was world-class in the truest sense. Looking forward to being in person next time with my dear friends in the Houston market in the fall, and then again in person in 2021 when HMG brings our Houston Summit back to the Houston area. Please spread the word on LinkedIn, Twitter, regarding the virtual HMG summits that are going to take place over the next 3 to 6 months. We'll probably have about 30 plus summits across North America, including London and Toronto. It's a great network. Stay connected and stay safe. Thanks.